Welcome to the Inspired by Jacqueline podcast, a refreshing place for women struggling with entrepreneurship, faith, or infertility. Stay tuned for today's episode. Hey everyone, welcome again to another episode of Inspired by Jacqueline. Wow, today's conversation is going to be very special because it's something near and dear to me, a conversation that I've been having. It's one of the pillars of infertility, and the reason is because it's a conversation from a professional perspective. So I'm really excited to have this person here with me, Kristen, and hopefully I don't butcher her last name, Delventhal. She is an assistant clinical director of a work of heart counseling and wellness. And I love that name. That name always resonates with me a lot. This office has locations in Bergen County, New Jersey, and they offer teletherapy in Pennsylvania, Florida, and South Carolina. And they are growing. This team has 13 therapists to support families navigating a myriad of needs. Kristen's clinical work has focused on supporting families navigating anxiety, mood disorders, and until the last few years, had a primary focus on children and adolescents. Her background has largely focused on evidence-based treatments, including DBT, CBT, and structural family therapy, which I'm sure she'll highlight and enlighten us later. This work created a deep sense of awareness regarding the importance of maternal mental health and the challenging road of infertility and parenthood as a whole. Currently, Kristen is focusing on maternal mental health and supporting primary and secondary infertility patients who may be navigating a myriad of emotions regarding this process, as well as their partners who are also at risk of mental health complications while navigating fertility, pregnancy, and postpartum periods. So this bio, I needed to read it fully because I usually don't read the entire bio, but I needed everyone to really get a good sense of Kristen's background, and not just that, we're talking mostly out of all of that on infertility and fertility journey, but they do a myriad of different things. Kristen, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Jacqueline. That was perfect. And you said my name beautifully. Thank you. So I appreciate that. No, I'm so excited to be here. And I will talk a little bit about my journey in my professional life, personally as well, how they blended, because I definitely started focusing on kids and teens. And I still do work with that population age-wise, but I always work with parents even when I was doing that. And it's definitely lended itself as I've navigated in my own life and professionally into really this fertility component of care and maternal mental health. So I'm very excited to talk about it today.
Awesome. So before we start on any of the questions, how do you start your mornings?
Always with coffee. I need my coffee.
Yes.
I need my coffee. I'm a coffee girl. So that is the first thing. I do try to get some movement in the morning. I think that's really important to kind of ground myself. And I notice I feel better when I move in the morning. So whether it's like a little Peloton workout or just taking the dog out, or even just like some like meditation where I move a little bit, I try to do that as much as possible in the morning because it's really, really helpful to me to start my day that way, especially navigating so many things people are bringing to me and my own stuff because I'm human first. So
Exactly. And I follow you. So I've seen a few times where you kind of share a little glimpse of your day of, and I love that because it brings reality to the table, right? It brings that, hey, I do more than this and I need my sanity and I need my break and I need to run my life as well. So I really appreciate when you share that. So what sparked your interest in becoming a therapist or a prenatal therapist?
sure. I originally got into the field of therapy because I have a younger sibling who is developmentally disabled. So that
Mm,
naturally lent itself into the helping world. I did a lot of work with kids and adolescents over the last decade at this point. But it wasn't really until about almost 4 years ago where I started dabbling into more of the maternal mental health piece. And I give credit to my twin sister, Kara, who is our clinical director at a work of heart counseling and wellness. Kara actually had a very traumatic birth experience with her son. And also, as a result of that, really struggled with some postpartum depression and OCD. So she sort of opened up my eyes to the world of perinatal mental health, which really encompasses like that fertility piece of trying all the way through postpartum, which now
Mm.
the evidence is actually showing us is even like 2 years postpartum can be a time where you're still navigating coming back to a sense of who am I now? Who was I then, synthesizing that? So it's a really growing field. But watching her navigate that and she really moving forward and taking the pain and struggle she went through and turning it into a purpose was very inspiring to me and opened my eyes. And being in my 30s, I started seeing a lot of my friends who were getting pregnant, but also my friends who were not getting pregnant. And because I was in that maternal sphere, and because I'm a therapist, friends started reaching out to me and sharing with me because I'm naturally in my own life the listener often in my friendships of what's going on.
Mm.
And friends would come to me and say, I'm actually having a hard time, or I had a really hard time getting pregnant. It finally happened. I'm now postpartum and I feel so much shame that I'm struggling postpartum because I wanted this so badly. So I saw this really big umbrella of need. And then when I got married and started trying, I was like, wow, I'm having a hard time getting pregnant too. I knew I
Mm.
had PCOS, which put me at risk for some difficulties with fertility. So I came in very aware and educated, but it's really all come to a head at this point with me being very passionate about this because it's such a need and we don't talk about it enough. I think
Mm.
we are gradually getting better, which is wonderful, but we have to keep bringing awareness to this so that people know that there is support, that they can have resources, and that there's no shame in struggling with this.
And I'm so glad that you what you share so far because you share from the perspective of a professional and a therapist, but also in being inclusive as far as this is a part of life. So with your friends and family members who might have been struggling at some point to the part that now you had been challenged with this and the need for communication and knowledge to be put out there. For me, my journey was 30 years ago and I had that walked for 10 years and I only saw a therapist once and it wasn't a great combination. So that's another conversation. But for me, just to seek help once or think that I just need some mental health at one point in my life versus from the beginning, that I feel had a huge impact in my life. And you mentioned the need to talk about it more and educate people more. I'm thinking back, I started this platform to educate and to share more and to communicate, but I'm like, wow, 30 years ago, I would have thought it was such a bigger leap that we've made in this conversation, and it's not. Social media, I think, started a little bit more conversation from the research that I've been doing, but still, there's not the conversations that we should have. So, with that said, you mentioned that you knew you had PCOS. For me, I didn't have a clue of anything because I had my menstrual period was fine and all that. It was heavy at certain days or months, but there was no, this is something that you have or you need to potentially look into this. So, with that said, from your experience, how far in advance should a female kind of start investigating in her fertility journey?
No, I'm so glad you asked that. And I want to say that when I got diagnosed with PCOS, I actually growing up like my periods were regular but heavy and I didn't really notice anything going on. My sister Kara, she got pregnant the first time she tried with my nephew Evan. So I thought we're identical twins. This should be a
Mhm.
piece of cake for me. And also growing up, something that a lot of my clients have shared with me and it resonates with me as a person as well is a lot of times as girls, we are told growing up, be so careful. You don't want to get pregnant if you're not ready. You hear this fear that gets instilled in you of like,
Yeah.
you get pregnant and you're not prepared. You don't want to go through that. It's going to be very difficult. So you think I have sex, I get pregnant, bam. It's going to be that easy, right? That's really, I think also, I still do work with adolescents and I work in a school as well. So I do, when I look at the health curriculum, think to myself, wow, in some ways, as far as we've moved, we still really have not in the way that we teach girls and women about their bodies because it's not that simple. There's only actually a small
Mhm.
fertile window, even for the healthiest, most fertile person. So that's very interesting information we don't have. But I think because my mom had endometriosis and she had breast cancer young,
Mm,
which sparked my interest in knowing about my body medically, I noticed I had some issues going on, and because of the power of social media was like, something's going on with me. Like I have weight issues, I have sugar issues with my body, and I'm fortunately educated and have health insurance, which I know we'll dive into later about
mhm,
access, such an issue. But I went to the doctor and I kept advocating for myself. And I went to several doctors who kept saying to me, well, you're just fat. You need to lose weight. And I kept saying, but why am I overweight? Like, what's going on
yeah,
with my body that I feel so inflamed? And it wasn't until I found a wonderful endocrinologist that said to me, something definitely is wrong. Let's look at all of your hormones. You do have
mm,
PCOS, you're insulin resistant, your sex hormones are not where they're supposed to be. So this is going to potentially impact your fertility journey. So to answer your original question about timelines, it took me a long time to get that information, but because I'm educated and because I'm in this world, I had the
mhm,
privilege of saying, I'm not going to wait. I have health insurance, it's covered. I'm going to go do all my testing prior to even trying to conceive because I know as a mental health person, the absolute roller coaster of stress that comes
mm,
with trying and waiting and trying and waiting and you know no test going
yeah,
positive, which I've still navigated to a degree but with more awareness of what's actually happening within my body. So I feel that if women can get more information about how their hormones are working, how their body is managing their cycle, all of these things, it can only empower them to be more aware and hopefully not have to suffer in silence or without help for a long period of time. I think the barrier to that is, of course, the access piece. So that's one of the
mm,
things that I fortunately didn't have to navigate because I have health insurance that covers some of that. And because I was pain in the butt with a lot of the doctors. I would advocate, I
mhm,
would push. And I think that's a huge thing for people to do too is to self advocate. No one knows your body and your struggle like you do. So it's
yeah.
okay to be a stereotypical pain in the butt. I would say you're not. You're just want to make sure that you're getting answers to these tough questions.
And how young do you feel is a good age, or what age range for a girl, a woman, young woman to want to find out?
I would say medically, I think, first of all, I think the younger we teach girls just about their periods is important. And girls are getting their menses so much younger. I have girls that I work with as well who are getting their periods as young as 9, 10 years old. So we're
Wow.
seeing girls get their period younger and younger. I'm not a physician, so I don't
Mhm,
really understand where that's going, but it is piquing my interest as somebody who's looking at the whole person when I treat. That being said, I think first and foremost, just giving girls more education about how their bodies work at an earlier age is important, and also about their fertile window and how your cycle actually works, I think is huge. Um, and then I think when people feel like they actually are even considering the idea of getting pregnant, it would be helpful to get the information. So I don't know if
mhm,
there's an age. I think it's an
right.
individualized decision. But for example, when my husband and I were engaged, I knew I had PCOS. So I actually started the fertility exploration process as far as my blood work and everything before I even got married because I thought
Mhm,
I'm by the time I get married, I'm going to be in my mid 30s. Also, a lot of the medical field will scare you into the geriatric pregnancy term and kind of make you
mhm,
feel like you're going to have an even harder time. So I thought, let me try to empower myself with as much information as possible, and that was my timeline. So I think the earlier you can do it, if you feel like
mhm,
you're getting to a place where you're planning for pregnancy, the better. You also, at the same time, need to know yourself. If getting more information is going to overwhelm you and
mhm,
impact your mental health, then you need to do what feels best for you. But I think just basic knowledge of girls' bodies, like we need to do a better job of in general. Like
yeah,
that's the
yeah.
first stepping stone for me. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of my goals. And like you said, it's a complicated conversation or way of how to communicate it. It's something that has to be researched because I want to advocate for conversation or some type of communication sooner than later. So I like how you shared educating girls a little bit better, how I learned about the cycle and a little booklet that was shared in grade school. And it was very basic, and then there was no conversation at home either because there was no knowledge there.
Yeah.
So there's definitely conversations in different ways and platforms. And like you said, not to overwhelm someone because it can be emotional at any stage, right?
Yes.
And so can you share a little bit about like the different types of fertility. I know there's a list of different possibilities. You mentioned PCOS, and then there's unknown infertility, which was mine. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I think for me, like knowing that I have PCOS could either be frustrating, but also empowering, because if you know something tangible, that can be very helpful. And for my folks I work with who have unknown rationale as far as medically, the doctor's saying, hey, we don't really understand why, but you are having difficulty with your fertility and conceiving, that can be very difficult because there's nothing tangible to wrap your brain around. So
Mm,
I think that's a really difficult thing. The ambiguity around conception and fertility, I think, creates a lot of room for anxiety. The unknowns of even when you're on a path, for example, when I work with clients who are navigating the IVF process. So the unknown of, I got 30 eggs, let's say, amazing, I have 30 eggs. But then it's like, I got 30 eggs and then they test them and only these many are okay. And then this many only came to the right level of maturity. And it starts to dwindle down until it's like, I have one embryo. And then there's this fear that comes with that if it's only one, is it going to implant properly? Is it going to come to term? All of these what ifs and unknowns. That is a very natural predisposition for anxiety. Likewise, the roller coaster of hopefulness and then disappointment can also create a grief cycle that is very
mhm.
understandable. And the constant anxiety and grief together can also create a situation that predisposes people to be at risk for being depressed. So while we want to instill hope and empower people with support and resources that are absolutely there, we can't mitigate the fact that these experiences absolutely put people at risk for anxiety, depression, and it can be very traumatic. So that trauma piece too is really important. We cannot neglect the importance of this coming from a trauma informed space as far as how we look at these patients who are coming to us. It can be very traumatic to go through this. And I've heard of people navigating loss and then secondary infertility. So I wasn't planning for this. There's just a myriad of things that come my way. And it really has to be looked at from a lens of, okay, where are you at risk and how am I beefing up those protective factors for you so that while we make space and validate your experiences and help you navigate all of those emotions that are okay to feel, I also make sure you have that support and protectiveness to walk through that process, which is one of the reasons I love your journal, Jacqueline, because I think
Oh,
that's a great tool for people to tangibly use. So I want
oh,
to give
thank
you a
you.
shout too as a tool, because tools are huge and people need
Yes.
those things outside of their therapy sessions too. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for saying that. And that came out of the need that I felt. It was a release for me in putting it together because there were conversations that I was having. I wasn't having conversations like throughout the 30 years about my situation. After the 10 years, I felt like I was completely done. And just to backtrack a little bit, you mentioned something that kind of hit an aha moment. I went through a huge depressive state, and you mentioned something about like when certain instances it becomes a grieving moment. And I feel that that's what I felt on a monthly basis when I was trying. And then it was like that monthly cycle, doing some treatments and then getting my period. That felt like a grieving process every single time, which led into my financial state being bad because my release was, oh, let me go shopping. Let
Yeah.
me go shopping.
Yeah.
Let me go shopping. So that was a whole bit of emotions, which led into 30 years later having conversations with people in my own industry, talking about their process, their walk. So I really appreciate everything you said. With regards to your journey, I know that you learned early and you were prepared with your knowledge, but how did that help you in your journey with your struggles, your challenge?
So I think I, as a person, am very big on planning and understanding and intellectualizing things. And that is probably my defense mechanism of choice
Mm,
as a human being. I feel like knowledge is power. At the same time, knowing things is not always the answer to feeling like you could sit with them. So I'm a big believer, even though I am a therapist, I always say I'm human first. So my therapist, I am greatly, deeply thankful for. I have done a lot of what's called IFS, internal family systems work, and EMDR, which is for trauma with her. And I am actually looking into getting trained into both myself because of how powerful they have been for me. I do use some of the parts work from IFS now with clients as well. And the goal of IS, especially when you're working with people navigating fertility and the grief feeling, and then sometimes the maladaptive coping that comes with that. So, like Jacqueline, for you, you said it's shopping. I also was like shopping, like Amazon return, Amazon return. And for me too, I think sometimes like because I'm already insulin resistant, so I'm naturally craving food, like food would become
Mm,
comfort for me, which it does for a lot of us. It's very
yeah.
stereotypical idea of that, but it can go in a negative direction. So knowing that I had those challenges and having that support was huge for me. I think while knowing is very helpful because I can logistically take the steps of what I'm going to do next as far as what I need to do, what I feel like I'm at the point of doing, and having providers who I'm very grateful for that I feel like
Mm,
are collaborating with me and listening and saying to me, we can go as aggressive as this, we can wait and do this over here, and making me feel very a part of the decision making has been huge.
mm,
Has not helped me though sitting with the emotion. That is the work that I think a lot of us have to do. And it's very vulnerable because you're already feeling the weight of the grief that comes on. And when you, every month you get your period or every month you see the negative pregnancy test and you're like, oh, I feel so,
mm,
when you have that weight of those emotions and you don't want to have to sit in them, it's very easy to push them to the side, to shop, to eat, to do anything else, or to say, okay, how can I problem solve and lean into that intellectualizing, which is not, none of that is all bad, right? We can't say it's
mhm,
all bad, it's all thrown out the window, but we too need to sit in the emotion. So I think that's the biggest message I try to get out to people is we have to be able to empower ourselves and problem solve, but it's very powerful. I would say even more so, more powerful to learn how to sit with these uncomfortable emotions and recognize why they're coming up and that they're really here to try to make us feel in the inside at our core safe. The anxiety, even though I don't like the way it feels, it's showing up for me because it wants me to feel safe and it's trying to say like you're in danger, we don't feel good, what do we need to do about
mm,
this? Or the grief is showing up, and for me, I think grief has given me the ability to pause more and say, what do I need right now? Do I need to slow down? Do I need to sit in something and notice and feel? And being able to sit with and look at those emotions, almost like for me, I look at it as like the board of directors. Like I am the CEO of my life and all these little emotions, kind of like the movies Inside Out. Like for kids, do a great job of that. That is so, so much
mm,
a great tool for us as adults as well. Think about them all sitting there at that circuit board and you're like, all right, why are they here though? They all have a purpose. That's, I think, the biggest piece for me that's helped me move through. Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And that kind of reveals as to how important maternal health wellness is. Share a little bit about that, like why it's called maternal health. If I'm struggling with infertility, I'm not a mother or maternal, but we are, you know. So how important is that wording in that maternal health wellness? And then at what point should women start seeking professional assistance or even community support?
Yeah. So so maternal mental health is used a lot. There's also the term perinatal mental health, which really focuses on like conception through postpartum, but more and more I think they're saying regardless of whether or not you are biologically already a mother, whether you've conceived, we need to open up this community and space to be very inclusive. And I think that's a
Hmm.
wonderful thing. So I do a lot of work with Postpartum Support International, which is a great nonprofit organization. They have a lot of free resources, which is wonderful. They do a lot of community based events. And I've seen through a lot of their support groups how inclusive we are trying to get as a maternal mental health community so that we are also making sure that women who are going through fertility issues, who families who are struggling with this and maybe saying, do I also want to look into adoption? Does that make me any less of a mother or a parent? If there's dads involved too, I don't want to forget about my dads. Like anyone who needs that support, they also are looking at culturally, are there groups that need more support because our Black and
Hmm.
Latino communities are not getting enough access to this, and culturally it's not always spoken about in the same ways it is by white females. So I think that's huge. So those are a lot of those community-based supports that are available and I think are awesome even to just look into. A lot of times what I've seen clients of mine do and women in our community of support do is they'll show up to events or outings. For example, our practice just was one of the main sponsors for the Climb Out with the Climb in Bergen County.
Hmm.
So that was vendors and resources for people navigating fertility, postpartum, etc. stuff for kids, stuff for families, and just going and even contributing to that, but being able to see that the village exists, that there are people who will talk to you about this, that's very empowering. And I think from there, doing that then can guide itself into, okay, what else do I want to consider for myself? I think community support, social support should always be there, because whether you're navigating this difficult process or any other life stressor, because life is hard, we need community support. So that's huge. As far as professional support, I think you have to know yourself. So you don't want to pathologize normal emotion. Of course, when you're going through the fertility process and you're getting that negative pregnancy test or you're getting your period, you're going to feel some frustration, some grief and loss, some sadness, etc. You're going to feel a myriad of emotions. You also might feel hopefulness when you're waiting for that test. You might feel joy if you think it's positive, right? Or and maybe it's not, and maybe you lose it. There's so many emotions that go on. It's okay to have all those emotions and to feel them very deeply. We don't want to take away the humanity in that and say, oh, you have a mental health disorder, you're not normal, right? You're not okay. It's very
Mhm.
normal to feel all of that. When those emotions are impacting your quality of life, when you feel like it's hard for me to function through the day, when you feel like every time I see a pregnancy announcement, I feel intense rage and I just can't sit with it anymore. Those are the times where I say maybe it's time to talk to someone, right? And I always encourage people to see providers who have either their perinatal mental health certification through Postpartum Support International, so PMHC would be a credential they have, or if they don't have that, that they and or also have training through ASMR, the American Society for Reproductive Medicine, just so that they have some understanding and training in all of this, and you're not seeing a general practitioner. There's nothing wrong with a general practitioner, but you want people to really have a more nuanced understanding of what's going on. So
Yeah, and I actually, outside of the mental health piece, I did notice, and it's different that based on who you're seeing, your doctors, etc. But for me, my experience was I had the GYN, and that's where I started the GYN, the OB/GYN, and it was my regular GYN doctor. But I started in that clinic with the tests and the questions and all that, but there was a lot of different, like, I didn't feel like there was a synergy of understanding
correct.
until I went into finding a doctor that specifically was a reproductive doctor and
Yeah.
specialist, and it was like night and day for me.
Yeah.
So the feeling was so different, the care was so different. So definitely understand. And then I know you shared earlier about more knowledge, more education, and there are some resources that I know you'll share with me so I can share as well. But with conversations, and this is the heavier one sometimes, conversations from family and friends who don't understand what you're doing, or even not even family and friends, just community in general, just having conversations. They know you just got married. Oh, hey, 2 years later, why aren't you having kids? What are you waiting for? Share a few tips or something in reference to whether you're speaking to someone who's going through this challenge and also speaking to someone who maybe may know someone who is going through it, how they can communicate, how they can better serve their loved ones.
Sure. So I have definitely been on the receiving end of some probably well-intentioned and
Mhm.
uncomfortable, the person having discomfort in not knowing what to say. So being on the receiving end of that, I have, as in my own humanity, struggled with those feelings that come up. I think it's important as the person who is on the receiving end to sort of accept that while we wish we could will people to change what they're going to say, that I radically accept I absolutely cannot control them, but I can decide how I'm going to receive or not receive that information, and also make space for whatever emotions come up within myself. So I think that's huge.
Mhm.
I have to validate within myself and give myself a lot of compassion around it's okay that you feel angry or frustrated or sad when someone makes a comment, however well intentioned or not, it's going to bring up that emotion and it's okay that I feel that. So I think practicing that self compassion, and that really is a practice, it's changing your inner dialogue of,
Mhm.
okay, Kristen, of course you feel that way. This moment feels horrible. once again, this is happening. Someone's asking when you're going to have a baby, like, oh, are you guys going to have kids? And it's the same people sometimes too. But being mindful that that's their issue or their stuff, or they're wanting to fill in the void in the conversation maybe with something, and that's not my need to answer that in a way that makes them feel comfortable. I need to be okay with how I respond and also how I sit with those feelings. So that's huge. For the people who are around people who are either trying to conceive and know that, or maybe you don't, right? I think that's a big one. The first thing I will say, and I feel like I shouldn't even have to, but people should stop commenting on women's bodies and asking them if they're pregnant. I don't know why in 2024 this is still a thing, but I see this a lot. And I've had clients of mine who are really in the thick of navigating recurrent loss and fertility battles, and then someone will say, oh my gosh, when are you pregnant, because they wore like a flowy tunic, and it's so triggering to their space of where they're at. And of course they're feeling a lot, and we'll work through that in their therapy and outside of that with tools. But just if people can stop asking it or making comments about people's bodies, that would be step one. Step two, I think, is also validation is a huge tool that we don't use a lot of. And I think that's a very simple thing to say, but it's a hard thing to feel as the person who's giving it. So what I mean by that is, if you know your daughter, your niece, your granddaughter, your friend, is a coworker you're close with, is going through fertility, saying to them like things like, and I think it's called like toxic positivity, saying things to them like, oh, like it's all in God's timing, or like, don't worry, it will happen, or like, just have fun trying to get pregnant. Those are all, I think, well intentioned, but they really miss the mark. So I think rather than just coming out with that sort of positivity, being able to say, this is really hard what you're going through, and I'm sorry you have to feel that way through all of this. This is tough. Is there anything I can do? And if not, I just want you to know I'm here for you and I see you. Like, just
Exactly.
witnessing the experience, right? Yeah, witnessing it, giving them the space to feel it, not trying to fix it, but creating space and then offering support. That's the best thing people can do, because I think it just lets the other person then who's navigating guide you on what they need or don't want, how they want to respond. And I've had friends who, they know I'm a therapist, they know that I talk about this very willingly, and they don't want to talk about it with me. I don't talk about it with them. I just leave the door open. And if they want to process and feel however they need to, that's not about me. That's about what they need. And I have to
Mhm.
respect and honor that. So we need to get into a better habit of, I think, doing that.
Got it. That's key. And so now we've discussed the different types of emotions and mental health needed and the process and challenges. Now, here's another challenge, and there's many of them outside of our physical and mental piece, right? Is the deeper questions and challenges of insurance, costs, access. You've mentioned it a few times throughout the conversation today, so if you can share a little bit, I know for me, it wasn't so much about access, it was more on the insurance side. So I did 6 IUIs and I was wanting to do IVF. It was an expense. It wasn't covered under the insurance until one day my doctor mentioned, guess what? They added IVF to the insurance. Now you have access to it. And my husband at that time and I, we were like, oh, okay, let's try this. And then we worked on all the paperwork, the prep, all that stuff. And then all of a sudden it was reversed. And it was like gut wrenching. It was like, what? I can't do this. And that actually prevented me, not prevented me, but I knew me. And like you said, you know yourself, you know your emotions. I knew what I could not handle anymore. And the conversations about everything else, adoption, foster, etc., everything was out of the plate now because it was like, oh, I can't deal with this type of emotion anymore. And I kept on losing myself. So, talk a little bit about how difficult that conversation is and the challenges when it comes to that and the emotions.
Yeah. So we could have a whole podcast about this for sure. Because it's such an important conversation. And unfortunately, right now, I do feel, well, in New Jersey where I practice, I feel less worried. But for other clients we serve in other states, I also worry about access and affordability. One, because laws are changing around access, and there's a lot of
Mm,
fear around reproductive health right now. Ever
yep.
since Roe was overturned, I think that has created a cascade of question marks for fertility clients and for people who have embryos and things. So there's a lot of anxiety and fear that I am navigating with that for people. But also, I think even if you're able to get to that point, it's like, how do I get there? Especially with the cost factor, because some insurances don't cover it at all. Sometimes you have
Mhm.
to navigate multiple attempts, especially when we're talking about IVF, right? A lower threshold, like IUI is typically the first line of treatment because
Mhm.
it's less invasive than IVF, it's less costly. So we try to go that route first for a lot of people. And then when you have multiple failed IUIs, you're like, okay, do I now qualify for this? Do I not? All of those question marks come up, and sometimes you don't. It is very inaccessible for people, I think, especially from an economic standpoint. If you don't
Mhm.
have coverage or you have very limited coverage for reproductive support with family planning, how how do you have a family if you can't afford that, right? So that creates a huge barrier and creates a lot more layers of risk for me as a mental health person to my client now, because I'm watching them literally try to climb up a 90-degree angle. Like, just it's a straight shot up to
Yeah.
try to get there, and it's like they have this boulder and they're pushing it and it keeps coming down and it keeps coming down, and I'm, we're watching that, and it's a very challenging process because of all these financial barriers. So that is a huge risk factor, I think, for mental health for people. Clients I have who have access to means, who have resources, they're not struggling, but that's certainly a barrier that they don't have to face. So it's one more huge piece that we have
Mhm.
to look at in the puzzle, absolutely. And also, I think the luring in the background right now, fear of, am I going to have access to IVF, access to fertility support, as we look at the changing political landscape, because we can't ignore that factor when we talk about this issue as well.
Yeah, and Resolve, the infertility organization, they were partnered with ASRM and in having conversations with Congress. And I felt really honored to be a part of that and actually have conversations and share a few snippet of my story and journey, etc., with regards to insurance and how I shared a point that was crucial in my decision making when I left my OBGYN, which was my breaking point in making changes and advocating more for myself and trying to find out and being more resourceful to learn that IVF was challenged and how one of the state that previously, Alabama, I think it was, or whatnot, where it just completely stopped. And I really can empathize with women who were challenged with that moment and even the moments now that they're being challenged with. So it's a huge array of emotions that, wow, I give kudos to you for what you do because it's definitely a needed support. And even though I went to a mental health specialist once in my life, I wish I was educated more on knowing when to go at an earlier stage. I just felt there was no conversation about it. So thank you for sharing that. Do you personally, on a personal basis, how often do you take breaks that help you on your daily mental well being?
I try to take them. I'm not always good about it. I'm human and I struggle with self care, as I think many helpers do. I think that's a very common theme. I do try to take breaks every day, even if it's something as simple as like getting outside on my lunch hour, or doing a page in the journal that you shared with me that you created, or spending time outside with my dog. Like, I try so hard to find little pockets of time, because I think those breaks are extremely powerful. They sound so simple, like going outside for 10 minutes, but that sunlight, the fresh air, even just the shift in the environment, it breaks up your
Mhm.
mindset a little bit and it creates space. And I think that's our goal always.
Yes, and if you had a superpower, what would that be? If you had that opportunity.
If I had a superpower, I would love to be able to heal people. I think, like, really
Mm,
truly heal people physically, mentally, from trauma, from disease. I think that would be like the coolest superpower ever, to be
mm,
able to really help people more quickly they struggle with. It's a privilege to sit on the other side of the room from someone and have them share with you all of the things they've navigated and are continuously navigating. And while I know it's their work to do, and as therapists, like, we're not I'm not healing. I'm giving people the tools and the space to work through things and heal within themselves, which is so powerful and beautiful to witness. But if I could make it so much quicker and easier for them, I would love to be able to do that. It would be great. Like that, I mean, I would work myself out of a job very quickly, but I'm okay with that because I want people to feel good. That's my goal.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome. So, out of what we've discussed today, what is the biggest takeaways that you want the listeners to take with them?
My biggest takeaway is that you will have moments where, with all of the emotion you are facing, if you're on a fertility journey, that you will feel overwhelmed by those emotions. You will feel very overwhelmed and you may feel powerless, even, especially navigating so many layers, so much complexity. Your feelings are not facts. So while it's okay and important and necessary to make space for all of these emotions and really feel them and not fight them off, you are not powerless within them. You have so much support. There are so many resources available. There are more and more people like us who are having conversations about this and are making space for this very needed topic. So even if you feel powerless or overwhelmed, you are never alone. And there are many more supports out there. So don't ever hesitate to reach out for help. Reaching out for support is the strongest thing you can do, even when you feel the most vulnerable.
Thank you. And how can they connect with you?
Sure. I do have an Instagram account if people just want to look and see what I offer, see a little bit about me, because I think that's one of the reasons I have the social media is so I'm a little bit more human and not just this blank slate therapist. That's kind of an old school way of thinking. That's
Yes.
not my philosophy. I'm very human centered. So I do have an Instagram account people can check out. And then also my website for our practice is aworkofheartcounseling.com. It has all of our philosophy on there, all the therapists that we work with. So whether you want to talk to me about anything you're going through or access resources, or if somebody wanted to connect with somebody for support, there are several of us on there. Some really like amazing women that I have the privilege of working with. So we're definitely available, even if it's just for resources or access. We always turn people towards support, even if it's not us. That's part of how we value our practice, is that we will never say, oh, you don't want to see us, see you later. Nope, that's not our philosophy. If you need help, we will turn you toward what you need. So
That's so awesome. And I have to see the new space because I haven't seen the new space. But I
yeah.
know when I went to, I think I met with your sister briefly. It just felt so homey. I am so in love with the name of the practice that really, when I saw that name and I walked over, that's how we connected at an event that you had a table and your energy was amazing and we connected that way, had a conversation. I'm really honored that you're here and what you shared and opening up about your journey and challenges. And I do wish you all the best and we'll share all of your information. Thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so awesome. I appreciate it. And I'm so grateful for the space you're creating with your podcast. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you everyone for listening and stay tuned for the next episode of Inspired by Jacqueline. Make sure to comment, share, follow, and